That was when we did the civil disobedience. You want to talk about that or
Yeah,
no?
let's talk about that, and then the quilt. And
Okay.
then, so 87.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay. Michael Bowers. Michael Bowers was the Attorney General of the state of Georgia, and they called him the Boy Scout because he was so squeaky clean, you know, just never anything in his past, never anything in his present. He was married to one of those steel magnolias, you know, the whole thing. And there was a guy named Michael Hardwick who wasn't political at all, you know. He was a bartender. I think it was the Cove. I'm so long ago, I'm not sure. But anyhow, he picked up a guy, and they went back to his apartment, and they started having sex in Michael's bedroom, as you will. There was a police officer who had a hard on for him for whatever reason. He had arrested him once. He had come with a warrant, but the warrant wasn't signed, so he, you know, couldn't do anything with it. That kind of thing had a history. And for whatever reason, the front door was unlocked, and the cop came in. And there was a man who was staying there, wasn't even his roommate. And the police officer said, "Well, I've got a warrant here for Michael Hardwick." And it was actually something that, I don't know if it was a traffic, whatever it was, and he had paid it. He had paid it, but it didn't make it into the system. So it wasn't a legitimate warrant, but nobody knew. And the guy just pointed, okay, because he's like, "A cop in the house, oh my God." And the cop goes like this, opens the door, and there's Michael and this guy. And the cop says, "Oh, yeah, you're committing sodomy." And he says, "Excuse me, what are you doing in my bedroom?" So he was arrested and arraigned and everything. And the sodomy law in Georgia meant that it was very difficult to organize, because you have to get rid of the sodomy law. You know. And people had started dying by then. No, they hadn't started dying yet when this happened. But what happened is that people worked on him. This is a really good test case. We're going to make it with this test case. I mean, this guy should not have been in your room, and what you were doing was not public. So, you know, we're gonna bust the sodomy law with this. And he had to be, you know, convinced that this was going to be historic. He was going to be lauded, you know, whatever they told him. And they, meaning, you know, different, you know, big shots in the community, lawyers and everything. So we're going to make this test case. All right. So he got a lawyer from the ACLU, and I knew her because I had been on the board of the ACLU for, I don't know, a year or so. And I knew she was good. Can't remember her name. And they took it to the local court, whatever. And of course, they said, "Oh, the sodomy law." Blah, blah, blah. But it went to the Georgia Supreme Court, and the Supreme said, "You know, this sodomy law, it's ridiculous. It's archaic. Okay, just we're getting rid of it." And Michael Bowers said, "Okay, we're not." He took it to the Supreme Court, and the Supremes went mental. If you read the ruling, And there is an appendix to it, but you know, it talked about the Judeo-Christian tradition that law was made from, and you know, it's like, excuse me, separation, church and state. Remember? Mm-mm. So that came down, and we had to organize a protest because you couldn't just let it happen. And we only had 5 months to do it. I'm not sure now why, but 5 months. So all the old war horses that used to organize Pride in Atlanta, we basically were charged with organizing people to get to Washington from the South. Okay. So we had to go from Atlanta to Georgia to the South. We got people there. There was meeting after meeting after meeting, and all these long distance phone calls, and you know, contact this one, da 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 da. And we actually had a conference here in Atlanta. The one, Atlanta, New York, and San Francisco were the main organizing bodies. Okay. And we talked about like what's going on here in Georgia, you know, and people were particularly interested because it was Michael Hardwick and it was Mike Bowers, you know. And so we're just ba-boom, 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 ba-boom. You know, I was working. I worked at that time, very physical work, and this was just exhausting. But we did it because it's important to do it. And we got probably 300,000 people there. And that was the first showing of the quilt. And I still had a press pass from the city of Atlanta. I don't think they really issue it for, you know, like